When I look back at my life and all the great things that have happened and the really big things that have happened in my life that have not only shaped my life, but the lives of my children and my wife, so much of it started in Atlanta, and it started in center stage, really. Um, when I got hired by WCW back in 91, I think it was 91, as a, third string announcer, that was like, to me at that time and my family, it was like winning the lottery ticket. It was such a massive, massive change for us. And then to be able to evolve, I guess, to be gentle about it. I used to say eat my way up the food chain. That sounded really aggressive.
Mm.
But to be able to evolve, not only as a character on camera, but to be able to get inside of the business side of wrestling and end up being president of the division and working for Ted Turner, that's kind of a big damn deal. But at the center of it all, no pun intended, is center stage. I haven't been back to center stage since the last time I produced a show there. So going back, and I don't expect it to look the same. I know everything changes, right? But it still means a lot to me, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Do you get a sense that wrestling fans, especially maybe in cities like Atlanta, kind of attach themselves to specific buildings, whether it's the Omni in the 80s or the auditorium before then, or maybe for those who came of age in that era as a wrestling fan, maybe they kind of feel the same way about a building like Center Stage. Do you kind of get the sense that that's the case?
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, I think wrestling fans, other than sports fans, and even compared to some sports fans, wrestling fans have a different connection to their quote unquote sport,
Hmm.
to professional wrestling than a lot of sports fans do for their teams. And, when I was a kid growing up in Minneapolis, the AWA, before I ever got a chance to work there and work for Vergania, AWA was my jam.
Hmm.
And the Minneapolis Auditorium, that's where it all went down once a month. The TV tapings took place in a small television studio. It was a local television channel there, but they had a small studio in the back, and they'd put on wrestling events for television, and there'd be 75 or 125 people there, and we'd always get a kick out of that. But man, when it came time for the matches, the Minneapolis Auditorium, or in some cases St. Paul Civic Center, that's, to me, Minneapolis Auditorium is like the Minneapolis version of center stage. And I think every city has that. I'm Cow Palace in San Francisco. Same thing. It's been around forever. It's got so much history. If those walls of that arena could talk, they could tell such fascinating stories for months and months at a time. So I think every city has one, and Atlanta center stage is it. Yeah, because it leaves, wrestling for whatever reason during different stages of your life
Hmm.
has different impressions upon you. When you're a kid, you're looking at this. These are larger than life. It's like a living comic book playing itself out on your screen. And the stories are simple, and you know who the good guy is, you know who the bad guy is. So emotionally, you can kind of invest and care about it, right? And then as you get older, you kind of look at things a little bit differently and appreciate different aspects of wrestling. So every stage, I think, of our lives, if you're a wrestling fan, has been impacted in different ways throughout your life. And it is a fascinating study. And that's why, I mean, look, I have a podcast called The 83 Weeks. It's nothing but a nostalgia podcast.
Hmm.
We touch on, current stuff a little bit, but for the most part, we're talking about the Monday Night Wars and things that happened in the 90s. It's one of the most successful podcasts out there because wrestling fans can't get enough of that kind of history. It's a little bit like NASCAR fans. They're kind of the same. I'll go to a convention or an autograph signing somewhere, or sometimes we do a lot of live things on the air on our podcast where fans can actually just ask questions directly live.
Hmm.
And I always get a kick out of it when I get these 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 25-year-olds that, they want to know. And I realize they weren't even born.
Yeah.
They're fascinated with an era of the business. And we're talking about adults now, legal adults that are fascinated with an era that took place before they were even born.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about the professional wrestling fan, how committed they are and interested they are in the history of it all.
Yeah. Now in 2025, obviously you've become involved with MLW, and of course we're talking about the show coming to Atlanta. What is it about MLW specifically, whether it was the people behind it, the wrestlers, the performers currently, that drew you to it and why you wanted to kind of get involved and be a part of it?
There's a number of things,
Mm.
but let's start with the fact that, and especially because it's happening at center stage, it has the same vibe to me as early WCW.
Mm.
Now I know MLW doesn't have right now television. They're not operating on the same level as WCW was back in 1991, obviously. But they've got their YouTube channel. They're promoting events all over the country. I get the feeling like it's the beginning of something that's going to get very big or has the potential to be very big. And I love being involved with something that's emerging, growing, and working with people that are taking risks. That team is operating on their own funds. There's no big backing behind them. They're fighting tooth and nail for everything they get, and they're all really committed to it, including the talent. So it's just a fun vibe to be around, as opposed, and I'm not knocking this because this is a fun vibe too. But when you go to a big WWE event, it's a different energy. It's a different kind of pressure, right? It's a much more sophisticated production. So everything is more intense, less loose is the only way I can say it. And going back to center stage with MLW, with a bunch of hungry talent that are fighting for an opportunity, and a promoter who's fighting to build his brand, that's kind of a comfortable place for me to hang out in.
When you still walk out in front of that live crowd, do you still kind of get that same, whether it's butterflies, sense of excitement that you did, say maybe, when you first started out in this business, back with Vern in Minneapolis?
It's changed my feelings.
Mm.
The way I react to it has changed a lot. I don't get nervous. Just never have.
Mm.
But I'm far more grateful. And I don't want to sound like my world's coming to an end, but my involvement in wrestling I'm going to get to a point at some point where it's no longer fun for me to go through what I have to go through to make an appearance. Travel sucks for everybody, and I'm just getting to the point. I love where I live. I live in a beautiful part of Wyoming, right outside of Yellowstone National Park. I've got a wonderful wife I've been married to for 40 years. I live in a home that I've only dreamt about when I was a kid. So it's not easy for me to pack up my stuff and leave.
Mm.
But I also know that when I walk through that curtain, I'm going to get a reaction one way or the other. And I appreciate that reaction so much more differently now because I know nothing lasts forever, whether it's by my choice or somebody else's. And I want to be able to appreciate and respect the energy, no matter what it is, and really be grateful for it. So it hits me differently. That's the only way I can say it.
How much do you kind of keep track of the current product, just the overall wrestling industry? And if so, where do you see it now? Is it in a good place? Is it in a healthy place? What's kind of your current view, I guess, of the overall professional wrestling landscape, if you have a view on it?
Oh no, I've got plenty of views on it, and I don't, what's going on inside of the ring and from a storyline point of view is of moderate interest to me most of the time. The business, however, of the wrestling business is something that I'm probably more fascinated with today than I've ever been. And to answer your question succinctly, wrestling is in a very, very, very healthy place. And that's largely, if not exclusively, due to WWE and their amazing growth as a media property internationally. They're literally changing the world. They are literally changing the world and opening doors for people like MLW and AEW and TNA. And the reason I say they're opening doors is that they are proving that professional wrestling isn't just a cool little niche. It is now a massive, massive, predictably successful property when done properly. And that opens up the doors for guys like Court Bauer and his team over at MLW. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Right now, things seem very, very healthy. Can it continue, in your opinion? I know there have been cycles in this business, but we seem to be in a good cycle right now. Does that continue as you kind of, peer into your crystal ball if you can?
I think from a growth perspective, WWE, I will never say they peaked out
Hmm.
because they keep proving new ways to grow that brand. But I think the growth that we're going to see, and this has a lot to do with the nature of television as we know it today.
Hmm.
One of the reasons that wrestling has always been successful is, relatively speaking, it's an inexpensive product to produce compared to a sitcom or a drama or an action film or any of that kind of thing, right? So since wrestling is affordable, comparatively affordable, and it's very successful and there's a proven audience for it, I think that more and more opportunities will avail themselves. Again, TNA, MLW, people that are emerging, right? I think their growth is going to be significant and it's going to continue over the course of the next 5 years just because it works and it's cheap. It's the same reason Ted Turner bought Jim Crockett Promotions out of bankruptcy and created WCW for Turner Broadcasting right there in Atlanta, where you are. He didn't do it just because he was a wrestling fan, although he was. He did it because he could afford it, because he didn't have a lot of money in the very beginning when he bought WSB or whatever it was. He could afford it, and he knew it would attract an audience, even though it was low-cost programming. That same reality exists today at a much different scale, but it exists today. And that's why I think, because of WWE's growth as a worldwide brand and expanding the genre to be a much more mainstream pop culture accepted property, it's going to create so many new opportunities for up and coming companies and emerging companies.
One of the things that kind of kicked off the Monday Night Wars, and the reason it became a war was when you guys went on Monday night opposite WWE. And obviously, the way you did that television was different than what they were doing as far as no longer, you put competitive matches on. Why do you think it worked as well as it did, the way you guys went about putting your TV on against the other guys?
When I was in Ted Turner's office, not far from yours right
Mhm.
now, your studio,
All right.
and I walked into Ted's office I was there to talk about international distribution. I had spent a week and a half prepping for that meeting. It was my first one-on-one meeting with Ted Turner, and I wasn't going to screw it up. So I put on my best salesman's hat. I knew what I was pitching. I felt comfortable doing it. And sure enough, I got in there within about 45 seconds. Ted didn't want to talk about international distribution. He wanted to talk about being competitive with the WWF.
Mm.
And he looked at me and said, Eric, I want to give you 2 hours, not verbatim, but you got 2 hours every night. Go head to head with WWF. Didn't expect it, didn't want it, had never thought about it, had never ever contemplated it. So I didn't know what to do. I left Ted's office. I walked across the atrium from the North Tower to the South Tower in CNN, where my office was. And I stood in the middle of that atrium, and it dawned on me, I can't be better than a WWF. I can't. They're the incumbent. They've been doing it too long. They've got the audience. They've got loyalty. They've got the advertisers. I can't be better than them. I don't want to be less than them because Ted's going to be pissed. I'll be different than them. And as soon as that different than them thought hit my head on the atrium in the middle of the CNN center, I walked to my office, locked myself in my office, told my secretary to hold my calls. And I got a yellow legal pad and I made a list of every way I could be different than the WWF
Mm.
because it was my only option. And from that, and it worked. And from that experience, and this is something that I carry with me to this day, I share it and others believe in it as much as I did back then. Forget about trying to be better than your competition. Certainly don't accept being less than, but if you focus on being different than, and you're bringing quality to the effort, chances are you're going to be successful. And it worked for me, not because I had the experience. It was a gut feeling, a blessing, whatever you want to call it. It was just an inspiration, and it worked.
Would you be able to do the same thing today if someone came to you and said, "All right, we were putting you on television. We want you to compete with, WWE in their form today." Would you be interested, A, and B, would the same kind of philosophy do you think work today?
Interested is a big question because it would involve so many different things.
Yeah,
I'm pretty happy with my life, so I'm not really excited about disrupting it too much.
right.
However, the challenge to accomplish something big like that will always be appealing to me because I like a good fight. I love a good fight. And to try to fight and find a way to be competitive will always be appealing to me. So I guess the best answer I could give you is it depends.
Yeah. MLW, obviously, you're involved with now. Tell me just a little bit about what your kind of role is with them, what you like to do with them, and then kind of the sell for the fans who just may be interested in coming out and seeing the MLW product overall when it comes to center stage.
Well, I'll start with the MLW product overall. I was really impressed with the talent. And again, having great talent, having a lot of great talent, that's cool. That's great. But having a lot of great talent that are passionate and cooperative, if you and I are competing against each other in the ring and you're just as excited about my success as I am about yours, and we're working together, and wrestling is a dance. I can't look good if you don't allow me to look good. You can't look good if I don't allow you to look good. But if we're working together to create the best product, sometimes magic happens. And I saw some of that magic the last time I was in MLW because of the attitude of the talent. They're having fun. They're still having fun. And that changes everything. So I think if you want to go and see young, some established, guys like Matt Riddle, there's some big names out there that are part of the show, but there's some younger up and coming talent that maybe you're not familiar with, but they bring their passion, they bring their A game, and they put on a hell of a good show. The thing I like about working with them is Court Bauer he worked in the creative side of WWE for a while. He understands storytelling. He understands character development. That's kind of like the sweet spot for me. That's what I'm most interested in. And he's allowed Court and his team, Jared as well, are allowing me to have some influence in terms of what I do, the segments I'm in, how I position myself in those segments, maybe even having some influence and suggestions for some of the other things on the show. That gives me the ability to kind of put my creative toe in the water and get that, this is what it was like back then. Oh, I had fun doing it then. I'm having fun doing it now, without having to, deal with all the ugly stuff that sometimes comes with the wrestling business. I need more money. I'm not going out unless you pay me. I don't have to deal with any of that. I just get to do the fun stuff.